6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, it felt like the Pacific Ocean belonged to Japan. From the coast of India all the way to the Central Pacific, the Empire of the Rising Sun seemed absolutely unstoppable. The Imperial Japanese Navy was undefeated, sweeping aside every fleet that dared to challenge it. Now, in the first week of June 1942, they were setting a trap. This was meant to be the master stroke, a plan to lure the last of the American fleet to its final destruction and knock the United States out of the war for good. Their target was a tiny but vital speck of land named Midway Atoll. By June 1942, the U.S. Navy was facing overwhelming odds. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and up against a superior Japanese fleet that was determined to finish the job they started at Pearl Harbor. The bait for their trap was Midway. The Japanese plan was brilliant, perfectly designed to draw the American aircraft carriers to their doom. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They never accounted for a handful of brilliant American codebreakers, the raw courage of a few American pilots, and a single gut-wrenching decision that would change the course of the entire war in just 5 minutes. The man behind the Japanese plan was the brilliant Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the very same man who'd planned the Pearl Harbor attack. His goal this time was just as devastating: draw out the American carriers that had escaped the first time and completely annihilate them. With America's carriers at the bottom of the ocean, Japan could secure its new Pacific Empire, directly threaten Hawaii, and maybe even force the U.S. to sue for peace. The plan itself, codenamed Operation MI, was incredibly complex. It involved multiple fleets spread across hundreds of miles of ocean, a diversionary attack on the Aleutian Islands near Alaska, and a massive invasion force heading for Midway. But the heart of the operation was the Kido Butai, the first carrier striking force, led by Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. This was the elite of the Japanese Navy, with 4 veteran carriers: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. These were the very same ships that had struck Pearl Harbor, and their pilots were the best in the world. Against this terrifying force, the Americans could only scrape together 3 carriers: the Enterprise, Hornet, and the battle-scarred Yorktown, which had been patched up in just 72 hours after being heavily damaged. The Japanese were confident, maybe even a little arrogant. Their own war games predicted a quick and total victory. But what Yamamoto and Nagumo didn't know was that their greatest weapon, surprise, was already gone. Down in a damp, windowless basement in Pearl Harbor, a team of overworked codebreakers had done the impossible. Led by a maverick genius named Commander Joseph Rochefort, Station Hypo had managed to partially crack the main Japanese naval code, JN-25. They started piecing together chatter about a huge operation targeting a location called AF. Washington thought it was another attack somewhere in the South Pacific, or maybe even the U.S. West Coast. But Rochefort had a hunch. He was convinced AF was Midway. To prove it, he came up with a brilliantly simple trick. He told the base on Midway to send out an uncoded radio message, faking a problem with their freshwater plant. Just a few days later, the trap was sprung. American codebreakers intercepted a Japanese message that read, "AF is short on water." Rochefort was right. The ambush was exposed. Thanks to this incredible intelligence, the American commander, Admiral Chester Nimitz, knew exactly where the Japanese were going, what ships they were bringing, and when they would attack. The U.S. Navy wasn't about to sail into a trap. They were about to set one of their own. As the sun rose on a calm Pacific on June 4, 1942, the first wave of 108 Japanese planes roared off Nagumo's carriers and flew toward Midway. American radar on the island gave a 20-minute warning, but the U.S. Marine fighters defending the atoll were completely outclassed by the legendary Japanese Zeros and took devastating losses. The Japanese bombers hit the island hard, but they failed to knock out the airfield. The Japanese flight leader radioed back to Nagumo with a critical recommendation. They needed a second strike to finish the job. This message put Admiral Nagumo in a terrible spot. His reserve planes were already armed with torpedoes, ready to attack any American ships that might show up. But now what? Should he rearm them with bombs for another attack on the island? Or should he wait? Just as he was weighing his options, a report came in from a scout plane that had been delayed taking off. It was shocking. An American carrier had been spotted. Then came another report. The Americans were here. On the Japanese flagship, indecision turned to chaos. Nagumo ordered the planes to be rearmed again, bombs off, torpedoes back on. Hangar decks became a dangerous mess of fuel lines, carts, and live explosives. It was in this exact moment of total vulnerability that the Americans arrived. But the first American attacks were a catastrophe. Wave after wave of torpedo bombers flew straight into a wall of anti-aircraft fire and swarming Zero fighters. These were the slow, obsolete TBD Devastator torpedo planes, and they were utterly massacred. Out of 41 torpedo bombers that attacked that morning, 35 were shot down without scoring a single hit. It was a suicide mission. But their sacrifice wasn't in vain. By flying in so low and slow, they dragged the Japanese fighter patrols down to wave-top height, leaving the skies high above the Japanese fleet wide open. And that's when Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, leading a squadron of dive bombers from the USS Enterprise, made a decision that changed history. He was running low on fuel, and the Japanese fleet wasn't where it was supposed to be. His training told him to turn back. But he had a hunch. He pushed on, taking a calculated risk. Just then, he spotted the white wake of a lone Japanese destroyer racing northeast. McCluskey decided to follow it. A few moments later, he broke through the clouds and saw them. The entire Japanese carrier force, their decks crowded with planes being refueled and rearmed. At 10:22 a.m., McCluskey and his bombers tipped over into their dives. In the next 5 minutes, the entire war in the Pacific turned on its head. Bombs tore through the flight deck of the Akagi, and then the Kaga, igniting the fuel and ammunition in the hangars below and turning them into roaring infernos. At almost the exact same time, bombers from the USS Yorktown found the carrier Soryu and hit her with the same deadly effect. In less time than it takes to drink a cup of coffee, 3 of Japan's most powerful aircraft carriers were blazing wrecks. But the fight wasn't over just yet. The last remaining Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, fought back with incredible ferocity. Her pilots found the USS Yorktown and slammed it with 3 bombs, leaving the American carrier dead in the water. But American scouts soon found the Hiryu. That afternoon, a final wave of American dive bombers, a mix of planes from the Enterprise and the now crippled Yorktown, sealed Japan's fate. They scored 4 direct hits, leaving the Hiryu a burning hulk to be scuttled the next day. The final toll was staggering. Japan lost all 4 of its carriers from the Pearl Harbor Strike Force, a heavy cruiser, and over 3,000 men, including more than 100 of their most skilled and irreplaceable pilots. The United States lost the carrier. Yorktown, which was finally sunk by a Japanese submarine while being towed to safety, along with 1 destroyer and around 300 men. The Battle of Midway wasn't just another victory. It was the pivot point of the entire Pacific War. It shattered the aura of Japanese invincibility and put a decisive end to their offensive rampage across the ocean. From this moment on, the strategic initiative belonged to the United States. Just 2 months later, they would go on the attack at Guadalcanal, beginning the long, brutal island-hopping campaign toward Japan. The American victory was a combination of many things. It was a victory of intelligence, won by the codebreakers who handed Nimitz the enemy's playbook. It was a victory of unbelievable courage, paid for by the torpedo pilots who flew to their deaths to give others a chance. And yes, it was a victory of pure luck. A series of fateful choices and chance encounters that put American bombers over vulnerable Japanese carriers at the perfect, terrible moment. It was this mix of brains, bravery, and fortune that allowed an outgunned American force to achieve its greatest naval victory and change the world. The story of Midway is one of the most incredible moments from the Second World War. If you want to learn more about the pivotal battles that shaped our world, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Let us know in the comments what piece of history you'd like us to explore next. The Battle of Midway is a stunning testament to how quickly the fortunes of war can turn. It marked the high-water mark of the Japanese Empire and the beginning of the long road to Tokyo for the Allied forces. The victory electrified the American public and proved that the Japanese Navy could be beaten. For the sheer scale of the losses and the massive strategic shift that followed, the Battle of Midway is remembered not just as a great battle, but as America's greatest naval victory, one that, in just a few desperate days in June of 1942, saved the Allied cause in the Pacific.